Hi, and welcome to The Missing Middle. I'm Cara Stern.
And I'm Mike Moffatt.
Yesterday, when Justin Trudeau announced the money for Toronto, at the meeting with Olivia Chow, there was a press conference, and he talked about international students, which I'm sure everyone here knows that this is something that Mike cares a lot about, that he's talked about. He's advocated for some reform on this. And so when Justin Trudeau said that, they were looking at tying international students' approvals to whether they have housing. I thought, well, that's the Mike effect right there. And I guess first of all, Mike, do you take credit for this?
Well, I think there's a lot of people saying it, so I don't want to take credit for any one thing. And it's the sort of job of being somebody on the outside giving advice that you can't actually decide anything. I feel sometimes like the guy in the stands, yelling things at the referee, say like, "Give him a penalty," and I don't know if I can take credit if the referee actually listens. But it is heartened to see that the federal government, whether it be on this or some of the recommendations on the housing accord, they seem to be moving in the same direction as some of the things we're advising. So, I am very, very happy to see that.
What he said yesterday was that they were going to tie approvals to whether the students have housing. I know that a couple months ago, the government announced that they were going to start looking into making sure that they're going to accredited uh, institutions. And I was wondering if you noticed, was there anything new actually announced? It's the first time I hear the Prime Minister saying it, but was anything new announced?
No, there's no specific policy announcement here, but I think it is the strongest language yet to come from the federal government that we've seen. Both Minister Miller, the immigration minister, and Minister Fraser, the housing minister and ex-immigration minister, make comments, around this area that they would look at it, they're thinking about it, and just at a high level that schools should be providing more housing. But it's novel to see it come from the prime minister and in pretty straightforward language that this is something that's going to be happening in the future. But what this is or what it looks like, time is still we don't know. We don't know.
You said in an earlier episode that even just saying that they might look into this in the future might actually affect the sentiments for investors of whether they should be renting out these homes to students if they know that there's a chance that the number of students coming in could be decreasing. Do you think that what he said was enough to sway investors?
I think you might see movement there, and you might also see movement by the schools themselves or the province. So, because we have to keep in mind that the federal government doesn't really regulate higher education. I mean, it is a provincial responsibility, and the provinces have been in full control of, how many students schools are allowed to bring in, and what are the rules around those things. The only sort of involvement of the federal government is by issuing student visas and some of the rules around how much you can work off campus as an international student and things like that. So, what the federal government may be doing here is sending a signal to both colleges and universities, but also the provinces of basically saying, like, get your act together, or we're going to come in and make things happen. So, it'll be interesting to watch over the next 3 months whether housing investors or the provinces or the colleges and universities start to change their behavior in advance of anticipated federal changes.
I wondered if they were overstepping at all. If this is a provincial jurisdiction, like I guess if they have the say in who gets visas, then aren't they really in charge?
Well, and this is a classic Canadian problem that basically nobody has full ownership over this thing. That ultimately it's the colleges and universities who decide who they want to have as students, but that is governed by provincial rules and regulations. And here in Ontario, some of those private public partnerships between private institutions and public institutions, all of that is provincial governance. But the federal government is involved because they, again, have the international student visa rules, have the rules around how much students can work off campus as an international student, but also the rules governing students' ability to stay after graduation and work under the post graduation work permit program, and then eventually gain permanent residency. So, because the jurisdiction here is kind of muddied and gray, the federal government absolutely could put in stricter visa regulations and those kinds of things. But I think the provinces can also say, well, you're just kind of finding a backdoor way of regulating colleges and universities, and that's not really your job.
Yeah, we'll have to see if any of them fight back against this. I guess it wouldn't be in their interest in some ways because they like this is a huge problem. This is a real challenge for post-secondary institutions then, right? Because they get so much money from international students, they don't get enough funding from the province. So I don't know like what do you think will happen? Are they just going to make sure are they going to take in fewer students? Do you think they're going to have to actually start opening more residences? What do you think?
Well, I think that some of them are going to have to take in fewer students just because there is a lag. You can't build a residence overnight, right? There's going to be a lag between, um, accepting the students and then, 3, 5, 7 years from now, opening additional residences. So I do think some of them, it's kind of in their interest at this point to scale back. Always, if you're any organization, I don't care if you're private sector or public sector, you would always prefer to self-regulate than have some order of government regulate on your behalf. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some of them scale back. But this is kind of a monetary issue, as you point out, that provinces have, and when we say provinces, we really should just say Ontario, because I would say this is about an 80% Ontario thing, a 20% BC thing. Um, there's some issues in Nova Scotia, but for the most part, it's really two provinces driving the bus here. Because the schools bring in so much money from international students, that gives the province opportunity to basically not give schools more money, to hold the line on spending, and actually have spending decline in inflation adjusted terms. So, you know, you've got this situation where it's in the school's interest to bring in more international students. On some level, it's in the province's interest, but there's all these spillover effects because of a lack of housing, and not just a lack of housing, but a lack of transit and healthcare and that kind of thing. And the students themselves tend to be the biggest victims of this, where their families raise tens of thousands of dollars in tuition, and they come to Canada just to find that their money doesn't go nearly as far as they thought it would, and there's nowhere to live.
If the government actually wants to tie student visas to housing, how would they actually go about doing that?
And that's kind of the $64,000 question here. Is it's actually not clear because we have to understand how international student visas work. This is not like immigration, where there's a federal target of 500,000 or whatever, and basically just you have a series of programs, but you let in the top 500,000 people by whatever criteria you have. International student visas are basically a binary process where a student gets accepted to a college or university, applies for a visa, and if they meet the federal criteria, they get it. And if they don't meet it, they don't. So, because of that, we actually don't know any given year how many visas will be issued by the federal government. So,
Yeah, you've really highlighted that about how we don't even know till after the fact. Like this many people came into the country. We didn't account for that in our housing starts. Like I know you've showed that that is not at all in the plans, or at least it hasn't been in the past. I mean, I hope that changes now.
well, I hope it does too, because I think ultimately what the federal government has to do is put some kind of cap on, or some kind of target on the numbers, the same way that we do with permanent residency and immigration. But once you put a cap on that, you have to have some kind of allocation method. That allocation method could be at the school level where the federal government says, okay, U of T, you get so many permits, and Conestoga, you get so many permits. Or they could do it at the provincial level where they basically say, okay, Ontario, you get 250,000 permits this year, and you're running, you keep saying you're running higher ed. Okay, that's fine. You get 250,000 permits, Ontario. You decide which institutions get it because it's your jurisdiction. And then once you do that, then you can layer in considerations about housing, because then you could go, okay, you know what? For every on-campus bed a college or university has that's made available either to a domestic or international student, maybe they get one more permit. Or for every new one they build, they get five more visas or something like that. So, but without that cap, whether that cap be at the provincial level or at the institution level, is really hard to tie in, number of residence spaces to, the number of visas, because right now the number of visas is essentially unlimited.
What's the impact on the universities if they can't do this? Because I know that there's caps to how much they can increase their tuition fees by, right?
Well, absolutely, and there are, so in the province, yes, there are tuition caps, and grants have been falling, but we should understand that it's probably not the universities that are going to get affected by this. One of the data points I've been posting is that in Ontario, we got data from an immigration consultant got data from an access to information request from the federal government to basically say, okay, how many permits are each institution getting? The data ran from January of 2022 to I think it was the end of April of 2023. So basically 16 months worth of data. And in those 16 months, according to this access to information request, two Ontario colleges, Conestoga, which is headquartered in Kitchener Waterloo, but they have some um, branch campuses all over the place, and Centennial, which is headquartered in Toronto. Those two institutions combined got more international student visas than Canada's top 15 research universities
Oh, wow.
combined. Yeah. So it's Centennial plus Conestoga got more than U of T and Queens and McGill and UBC and Western and University of Ottawa, blah, 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 down the line. So that's who's really would be affected by a scale back is the colleges, because they've been ramping up more. And when I say Ontario, we have to understand that according to this again, this ATIP, this access to information request, that roughly 54% of all international student visas were issued to Ontario institutions, despite the fact that we make up something like 37% of the population.
Do those colleges also have caps?
The college, so well, there's no federal caps on anyone. There
Sorry, in the
were
terms of the fees, do they need international students in order to be able to afford to continue?
Well, they're making a lot of money, and this is where it gets interesting. The discussion gets a little complex. That colleges, really have been starved for funding over the years, right? And I think we have to understand some of their activities based on that. Ontario tends to be the lowest. Well, not tends to be. Ontario is the lowest per capita funding for higher ed of any province, and then colleges are also funded less than universities. So these guys are getting the smallest piece, the smallest piece of the smallest pie. So going back to the Wynne government, there were really efforts to scale up the colleges, allow them to enter into public-private partnerships and that kind of thing, and get more international students to help fill in the gaps. So, and they certainly did that. But the line that I keep using is that when you give somebody a magic money
Magic money
tree,
tree.
the magic money tree. If you give somebody a magic money tree, they tend to shake it far beyond what they need. And I would argue that there are a handful of colleges that did exactly that. That they probably needed 3 or 4 or 5,000 international students to make the numbers work. But then you go, okay, well, if we're making this much money on 5,000 international students, why not 10? Why not 15?
So we'll have to see how they respond to that in the new year.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see not just how they respond, but who responds. Does the colleges start to scale back their enrollment plans? Does the Ford government or the EB government in BC start to rein in some of the institutions that have experienced higher growth? Or does the federal government have to step in and say, guys, you guys aren't behaving in a responsible manner. So we're going to have to lay the hammer down. I really don't know how this is going to play out, but I do know it's really going to be fun to watch.
Thanks so much for watching this episode,
Please like or subscribe or leave a comment.
and we'll see you next time.